So we're going live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. So we are here for another presentation. So this time, let me present you the speaker, Eric Tauler, so whom you had seen in the panel discussion before. So he's an experienced global project manager at AstraZeneca, so leading cross-functional drug development teams in late-stage oncology. And the topic is the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on PPM. So I'm very excited and really want to know your ideas. So Eric, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you for the Y Summits for allowing me the opportunity to share some ideas. Some of you may be asking the question already, what does this really have to do with project and portfolio management, or anything that's really being discussed today and tomorrow in the seminars. And I'll tell you that the way this topic got started was some of my longstanding relationship with some of the event organizers who approached me last year, as they did many of you, and asked if I would be involved and asked me to think of topics. And of course, at the time, we were really in the heart of the pandemic, and it was certainly playing a big role in all of our lives and having impact on us. And lots of questions were coming up internally to where my organization is, as I'm sure they were for yours. So I thought that this would be something good to maybe speak about. And so I decided to go forward. The truth is, I was planning for our original date, which I think was February, and then I knew that it got put off. And then I think in May or April or May, they reapproached and said, "Oh, are you ready?" And I said, "For what?" I completely forgot about it since February, but luckily we had already done the work. So one of the things that will become obvious as we go through this is that it was originally thought that we would be discussing the impact on project and portfolio management, but it seems that the things I'll be sharing with you are not limited to this group per se, but more broadly. And as I'll probably repeat a couple times, that the way we came up with some of the results and ideas that we'll share aren't things that should be counted on, as solid, but more thought-provoking and maybe hypothesis-generating. So those are my disclaimers before I say anything. So first, I want to get to an introduction and background to what it is we try to do. Then we'll talk about the demographics of the questionnaire. So obviously, we did a questionnaire, what the responses are, and some analysis. And if there's time, there's discussions. And if I don't remember to say it at the end, I'll say it now, that we have the whole results completely tabulated in an Excel, so anyone is welcome to have it if they so desire. Please reach out to me through the conference or otherwise, and be happy to provide it to you. Okay, so introduction and background. So first of all, the first question that comes to mind is, how are we going to assess the impact? Clearly, we want to ask people, and there's sort of three broad categories of how one might do that. You might have a casual conversation just with people you know. Of course, that's the easiest thing to do. It's also the least rigorous, and anything you got from that would certainly be not very reliable. You could also do a strict scientific survey where it's a true random sampling of a representative group of people. This would be very difficult, quite rigorous, probably pretty expensive in the end, although the data would be most reliable. What we settled on was a sort of non-scientific survey. Actually is a non-scientific survey that was doable, but it was doable. It casts a pretty wide net, actually wide in a way that we didn't expect. And it gives you more of hints of trends rather than actual steady conclusions, but you'll see where that goes. Okay, so in the end, our final approach was we created an anonymous survey. Some of you may have actually seen the survey being on my LinkedIn contact list. It had 25 questions, both multiple choice as well as open text. Initially was circulated on LinkedIn as a general post. definitely, like many of you, many people in my personal network, I would say definitely over 500 people in the PM realm, certainly a lot more in the not necessarily PM realm. Also targeted PM leaders that were found on LinkedIn because of the value of their impact. They weren't necessarily in my network, but eventually sometimes with conversation became in my network. As I was trying to get more and more input, we ended up circulating on Facebook. I'm not a big user of social networks, so that wasn't such a big network for me. But I sent it to some contacts just as another way of asking them to also circulate. And again, now getting input from people where not necessarily PMs, and then certain individuals that wouldn't have captured in any of those approaches, or maybe they just needed an extra nudge. So people who I knew, perhaps who were head of project management departments or senior project managers, and I knew they would do it if you had just asked them. So again, clearly not scientific, but it's a fairly wide net. All right, so let me get into the demographics of who actually responded. So from LinkedIn, so if you ever post something to LinkedIn, you'll notice that they do give you some kind of demographics. It's somewhat reliable, but and it depends on how you use it. So definitely, last I checked, which was sometime last year, when I stopped the survey, definitely we had 1,000 views of the survey that was posted to LinkedIn. Had a few likes, so thanks for that. Also had about 50 people who completed the survey. So that was, having done this for the first time, I didn't realize how low the turnout rate was. So of 1,000 views, 50 people completed the survey. Also, something I'll say as an aside is that when I looked at the average time, I could see that was quite long, but it averaged from several minutes to hours. So clearly there were a number of people who opened it, didn't like in the middle, or got distracted and just left it. So hopefully there were actually more people than 50 that actually did want to take it. Also, we represented from 10 different companies, so that's not such a wide net, but it was definitely not all in one place. More than 10 different titles. Most of the views, so if you look at the views up here, most of the views were by project managers. But interestingly enough, as we'll see later, the people who completed it were not mostly project managers, at least didn't declare themselves as project managers. And in terms of reach, we were mostly happy with the overall reach. We went from East Coast to West Coast in North America, also hit Germany, Denmark, and UK. Those were the only European countries that were noted. Again, that's just coming from the LinkedIn demographics. If we go into the questionnaire itself, it had some demographics up front, which allowed us to find out where these people were from. So most of the respondents, 2/3 of the respondents, seem to be highly experienced. So these are the people on this side in this left graph here, highly experienced, but only half of those, less than half, 44% of those, have been in the current role. So it's a bit of a paradox if you think about it. So in both of these, only 44% were in their current role, but 2/3 of the people had the credentials for the current role. So it could be that some people were promoted into the current role, but they already had the credentials. Just something to think about. With regard to the employer of these individuals, a large percentage were from pharma or biotech, which probably makes sense since those were predominantly my contacts. So 71% were from pharma or biotech. A very good cross section of different sizes of companies, from everything from the really small companies to less than 100 to sort of the more blue chip type companies of more than 25,000. With regard to role, smaller than expected participation by project managers, as I was saying. Most of the views of the questionnaires were from project managers, but the actual completion was certainly not in the majority. So not exactly sure why, and we didn't expect it, so we didn't think to probe if you're not in project management, what other department are you in? Again, some maybe future food for thought if this were of interest to anyone to pursue further. Now let's look at the responses. Finally, here we're trying to get to the meat of this discussion. Again, reminding you that because the nature of the survey, I would consider this more hypothesis generating than conclusive. Not to mention that there are this is a fairly small subset, but there are some interesting results that may point in an interesting direction. And maybe I just contradicted myself. And we're not going to look at all the different data cuts among the questions, but again, happy to provide the raw data for you to peruse as much as you like. So first, let's take a look at like one of the questions. So one of the first questions, well, one of the first questions was, you know, how do you look at your personal adjustment to the pandemic? So it's kind of interesting. I was a little surprised that a large percentage of the people found it anywhere from easy to moderate, and really only a small percentage found it difficult. So that was a little bit surprising, again, even though it's a small sample size. So now what we thought would be interesting is to look into these subsets and say, of those people who found it easy versus moderate versus difficult, is there anything that we can say about them in particular? So looking then at the breakdown of those who found it easy, that's the green section, then the split between project management and non-project management role was about 50-50, and 4 people just left it blank. They didn't say what their role was, but all were pharma. So everybody in project management, I'm sorry, everyone who found it easy fell into the pharma category. Of the people in the project management role, 2 were office-based, 7 were remote or mixed, and even the 2 who were office-based had previously set up a remote workspace. And the hardest part for this particular group in the PM role was due to family being present at times or needing the separate space. So again, of this easy group of the people who were not in project management, it was equal between office and mixed. Most were already have an office to set up, or it was easy to set up from what they said. And the hardest part for them, for the non-PMs, was more about socialization. So one wonders if maybe the unusually cross-functional nature of our business, meaning pharma, is what made all of pharma be the ones that were easy. So we're normally cross-functional. We're communicating with people that are, as we are today, across the sea, across time zones, and so we're remote or virtual by nature during a lot of our work. So that I wonder if that is part of it. Why are PMs the ones that found it easy? Was that they already worked this way. The fact that even remote workers found family as a challenge is also something that's kind of interesting and maybe worth investigating. For the non-PMs, then down here, what really stood out here for me was the working harder, which was a specific inquiry in this survey, and we'll get into that in a second. So these non-PMs who thought they worked harder. So we'll see that in a second. All right, so now going to the next category, those who found it moderate, those orange. So this is the almost equal to the a little less than those who found it easy. So the split between PM and non-PM and unknowns of the 20 people was 2 to 1 to 2. So almost a 2 to 1 of PM to non-PM. So you start, maybe you're starting to see a trend here that as you move to non-pharma, so the pharma was 2 to 1. As you're starting to move to non-pharma, you're starting to see a transition of easy to not as easy. Of the 4 that stated that they were in the PM role, all were pharma and all were office-based. So, and the hardest adjustment was the lack of face-to-face with team, family, and social. So again, sort of somewhat interesting. Of the non-PM role, all were pharma, about half were office-based. Most commented they already had an office or was easy to set up. And the hardest part was the socialization and working more hours. Again, we'll see that coming up in a bit. The mystery folks that didn't mark for PM, I think that could have been academics. That resonates certainly with probably most of us who have children, who have seen that the academic part resonates. Down here, they worked in academia, because as people with children, you know that becomes a struggle during the pandemic. And if you have a spouse or significant other who is a teacher, that's also was a new adjustment that had to be made, as you probably know. Okay, so now going to the last section of people who found it difficult. There's only 5 people here, so super small size. Really can't make much of this. Super small size on top of an already small size. Only 2 were in pharma, 1 is in PM, and 1's not. So again, it's a little small, so you can't really say much, but it does suggest that, going from 100% pharma over here to only 2 in pharma over here, you do see a sort of suggestive trend that the pharma folks tend to see this as easier, and the non-pharma folks as less easy. For the one person that did say they were in PM, they were one of the 2 in the pharma group, and the hardest adjustment was again it was dealing with the kids at home, which is not surprise. Again, this is N of 1, so you can't say much except for that the working hard is something that was seen in the last 2 groups that we'll see here. So of the 3 that didn't specify PM, all were pharma, and the challenge was the socialization. Okay, so the next thing that we decided to look at was whether or not people felt that they were working differently during the pandemic versus pre-pandemic. And so it was kind of interesting here that it was almost a 50-50 split between those that, yes, worked more, and those down here in the yellow, and I guess yellow or gold and dark red, that worked the same or less. Or no difference or less. So it was almost a 50-50 split. And then we noticed some interesting trends among those that seemed to state that they worked more before. So we decided to parse this out a little bit to see if it actually panned out. So of those that say they worked more, they know that they worked more. It was more or less an even distribution between experience levels. From the smallest group was 4 in the 11 to 15 year, but more or less of the 26 people that said they worked more, it was across all categories. Those in PM versus non-PM versus undeclared, also more or less even distribution among this top group here. Office-based versus normal, again, it didn't seem to make a difference among these 26 people. And also those who believe they are perceived as working more than not. It was pretty much even. So among these people that work more, some of them thought they were recognized as working more, and some of them thought that it was not recognized. So that was kind of interesting. Where the differences that were noted is that most were in pharma biotech, and although all of them thought their organizations did either a moderate or good to better job in responding, they were still working harder than before. So this one's a little bit tough to interpret. It seems that pharma and biotech were the ones who believed they were working hard, but at the same time, they also seemed to believe that their organizations were doing a very good job in responding. Okay, I'm going to try to move quickly, and this will be my last slide, because I think we're already about 25 minutes in, if I'm not incorrect with them. So we're just going to look at the breakdown of those who said they worked the same as before. This is the last group. The final group here of the final group in the middle here was too small to really derive anything. So again, looking at the group that worked the same as before, it was more or less an even distribution between all sizes of organizations. So that was interesting. Everyone, didn't seem to be a differentiator there. Office-based versus remote, didn't seem to be a difference there, and all thought they were perceived as working the same or less. So for those that worked the same as before, they thought that they were perceived that way. Now, you might remember from the last slide that those who were working more, half of them actually thought their companies didn't realize they were working more. So that's just sort of interesting. The most differences were noted here. That most of those, again, of these 17 people, small subset here, 12 of them were in the experience range, so that may be suggestive too. Also, most were in biotech. Less than 1/3 were actually in PM, so that sort of surprised me. And although they all thought their orgs did a moderate or better job, almost all thought their organizations did a moderate or better job. So that most people seem to have thought that overall. So, what did we make of this? If you look at the differences, you might say there were a bunch of experienced non-PM pharma professionals who are working less than before. So of course, maybe you might think that they thought their companies were doing a good job because they're not working as much. I could have also added, the group that worked less, but it was so small that really didn't seem to contribute much. So with that, I will close and thank you. I'm happy to take any questions. And again, the full data set is available as an Excel. I'm happy to send it to you at any time.
Thank you, Eric, and thanks for offering this invaluable data to everyone. I think we are all interested, and I have one comment from Darshan Shah who says your sample size is too small for any comparison with more formal or large surveys, but I'm curious if you have results from any similar surveys, only larger or scientific.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. It's nice to hear from you again. No, I'm sorry if I didn't make it clear. We were very let's say prescriptive in the beginning, and knowing that this number one was not a scientific survey, and only afterwards realized, even after pushing, that it was such a small sample size. So we don't take any of this data as something that should be taken to heart, really as suggestive and maybe more hypothesis generating than any kind of conclusive evidence of anything.
Thank you, Eric. Feel free to post your questions if we still have a couple of minutes. And I definitely think this is fantastic, these findings, although, the sample size is small, but I think it's really interesting to see how people react. And actually, we also see also over the world, how each of the countries reacted to the pandemic. So that was also very, very interesting to see the reactions, what kind of restrictions have been put, how people react to the restrictions, what kind of feedback or agitation or resistance people had on the lockdown. So and even we could see a lot of difference in the different states in the US. So definitely worth taking some time to digest all these conclusions and these observations that will help project organizations to prepare better for any future pandemics. Or I think it's a part now. A lot of thought is right now being shared, and we do know that there might be a hybrid way of working, and so I think it's really, really interesting. We do have another question from Joe Stalder. Eric, any plans to follow this survey with another one about reintroduction to the workplace? Absolutely fantastic question. And I know that I have got some feedback from Australia where people are facing this reverse cultural shock after they have been asked to come back to office. So 70% of the people who were asked to join the office, they had severe issues adapting. So I'll let you continue.
Well, thank you, Joe. Nice to hear from you. I saw that you had joined. No is a simple answer to the question, but I think it's a great thing if you want to take it up. Certainly some thoughts here, and maybe some learnings on how not to do the questionnaire next time to make it more valuable. But I will tell you that we've had just internally as many of you have had, and Mithun just alluded to. We've had some discussions about this, and one of the things that came up just the other day was, oh, by the way, you used to schedule meetings at such and such an hour in the morning, but now I'll be commuting at that time, so I can't be in a meeting, at 7:30 if I'm commuting at 7:30. So it used to be I could just go downstairs and jump onto the call, but I can't do that, or I have to take the kids to school, and I did, and they were just schooling from home. So I think just to respond, I think that's going to clearly be some of the readjustments. And the other thing is, I think that it's a hard sell and it's a hard pill to swallow, but for companies like that have routinely depended on these brick and mortar offices, and now have found over the last year and change that the world didn't stop because we all went virtual. It's a tough pill to swallow. Like, why do we have these enormous infrastructures if we can do so much without them? So yeah, I'd be interested, Joe, if you want to do it. I'm happy to tag along for the ride, but probably not going to do it on my own.
So thank you, Eric, for this wonderful presentation and all these insights. So we have no more questions right now. So I suggest we all move to the break. So we have a networking break right now. So we'll go backstage, and you can use this networking button that you have just below sessions on the left-hand side menu, and you'll be meeting people randomly, and you might have a good discussion. So I really like this concept of random networking sessions. So enjoy it, and take time also to see the other sessions in the part of Expo. So see you in 30 minutes. And thank you again, Eric. So
thank you, Mithun. Thank you, everybody.